Welcome to Bad First Impression, the podcast about movies and where we meet them. We're currently on a series of episodes right now where the guest comes on to defend a movie, or in this case, movies. We're talking about a trilogy today. I have with me occasional producer of this podcast, owner of Myfriendsbasement Studio, and comedian Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, Kwiecien?
Kwiecien. It's like an F.
F.
Yeah.
I was putting a V in there.
Yeah, it's all good. There's a W in there if you're
okay.
spelling it out. So
now, you didn't exactly pick this. I did pitch this episode to you. But like when we're walking out of a studio, I always talk to you, on episodes that you're here for. This is something you've brought up to me at least 2 or 3 times. Like you'll just kind of drop as like, not necessarily, I'm not saying you were hinting, but you do say like, oh, that gets me thinking. Like what's a movie I would want to defend? And you've brought these movies up.
So, we're talking today
about the Kissing Booth trilogy.
Yes. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I rewatched them. Yeah. I know you rewatched them.
This was not a rewatch. This was a fresh watch.
I have questions for you then.
The last 3 days, I woke up early and started my day with each of these movies for the last 3 days. Interesting way to then go about and live a day afterwards.
Yes, it is. So Kissing Booth, I like to mention things that are slightly off that, like in general passing, I'll use it as comedy. I'll say things that are like a little bit off and that get a reaction, right?
Yeah.
And Kissing Booth is one of those things with my roommates where I'll bring up and I'll be like, oh, I love that movie or something like that. And I'll always get a rise out of my roommates. Be like, of course you would. It's a terrible movie. Like it fits if you know me as a person, it would fit what you know of me to think I like that movie. Okay. And if I go back to that well of mentioning it, it'll usually get a laugh. But the movies themselves, I did enjoy the first time watching them.
Did you watch them all straight the first time, or did you watch them as they came out?
They came to me in the middle of the pandemic. So I moved to Tampa, Florida in the middle of the pandemic because I was doing actually curbside comedy. I wore my shirt for that specifically. Yeah. I was doing backyard comedy shows up in New Hampshire. And then during the first wave of the pandemic, the weather got cold. You can't do outdoor shows anymore. Can't socially distance. So I went down to Florida to try and continue to do shows there. I didn't have success finding the venues. And so within a few weeks, me moving down there, I was like, I'm not going to be here permanently.
I can't do the thing that I wanted to do here.
Well, that, and I thought maybe it's a longer term move. I realized I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I was going to move my bed down after Christmas because I moved there right before Christmas. And I was like, I don't want to move any of my stuff. I'm not going to be here long term. So I was staying on an air mattress in Tampa, Florida for about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't performing, was looking for jobs, deep depression. And also, I have an addictive personality. There's certain things where I like, if I start to watch something, I feel like I need to watch it all the way through.
You get kind of compulsively obsessed with it. I have a similar sickness, yes.
Yes, and it's like I've done it with books too, or other things. But I watched Kissing Booth, and to me, it was so funny. It's just like, it's not funny because the movie's funny.
It's not like a script filled with successful jokes.
No, it's funny because, and I'll pull out my phone and I'll kind of go through a few different things, but it's the same way where it's like, I'll say something that's slightly off to get a reaction. This movie is just off a genre of movies that I love, coming of age films, that it feels like it's almost a satire of that genre, and it's not trying to be.
That's the thing, is that how do you apply intentionality to something like this, right? Because I think, especially in Joey King's performance, who plays the main character in all 3 movies, I think that she honestly is not an actor I'm super familiar with, but I think in these movies, I think she understands exactly the movie that she's in.
Yes.
And I think that her performance, while I wouldn't categorize it as a great performance, is giving exactly what is being asked of her.
Let me ask you a question. Who is this movie's audience? Because I can't figure it out, and that to me is very funny.
I think so. I did a little bit of looking around here. To the best of my knowledge, and I might have the timeline a little messed up here, the first movie is based off a It's kind of like a step below a young adult book, I think. Like, I think it's meant that, like, theoretically someone in the 10 to 12 range might be able to read it and not be like held back by the level of it.
I was trying to figure out, like I was looking up this morning who wrote and directed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a male.
It's the same guy, Vincent Marcello.
Is he did the other, To All the Boys I Knew Before? Is the same
I
guy?
don't think it's the same director. I will try and pull that up as we go.
But because if that's true, if that book was written for 10 to 12-year-olds, the amount of sex that's implied in the movie is not for that age range.
You know what? You're right, because this is like
they have a lot of sex for like a PG-13 audience.
Here's what I'd say. There is like
PG audience.
If you've seen To All the Boys movies, right?
Yes.
So I've seen those as well. I watched those during the pandemic because my girlfriend Lily has been on the show several times. Really liked the first one, and I think had skipped the second, and the third was coming soon. So we're like, let's go through them.
Yeah.
And my was like, I thought the first one was basically a perfect execution of like what it's going for, right?
Yeah.
It's such this wonderful, just kind of like coming of age. It shows you characters who are like young adults making mistakes, but you understand it because we've literally all been there.
It's also an Asian household.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is like, it very ably weaves the kind of issues of cultural differences as you're growing up in America into those stories.
Yeah.
The second one I feel like is kind of diminishing returns on the first. Like, it's just a slightly worse version of that one. And the third one is like an actively bad movie that kind of pisses me off watching.
And this is not that far off from that.
Yeah. So what I'd say really generally here, the first movie I don't like as much as the first To All the Boys.
No.
But I think is like a totally, like you said, there are kind of honestly dumb moments where I'm like, that's good movies don't have moments like that.
Yes.
But I'm on board with this because I'm watching this dumb movie. The second movie is the longest movie ever made.
It is. It's all of the movies are over an hour, 45 minutes, which is wild.
The second movie is an unforgivable 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like watching Satan Tango. It's so fucking long. I like it literally, and it moves in slow motion. Like normally I watch movies usually with my phone out of the room so that I can pay attention to them.
There's no reason.
With this movie, after the first one, I was like, okay, it's not fully there. So I had my phone there so that I could be taking more active notes, so that I could, I was having conversations about future episodes. But I would like answer a text and I'd look up and I would make sure I understood what the plot point was in the second movie specifically. And I would see like where I was, in the little, I forget what you call it, like the time code.
Yeah.
Time code. And I would be like, surely 15 minutes have gone by since I've last checked. And it's like 2 minutes. Like literally, I watch this movie checking every 2 minutes, waiting for it to end.
Yeah. So to get back to your original question, this movie, I watched the first two back to back, and I think I watched them both twice in like a 3-day window.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was one of those things where I'm like, this is just whatever my depressive state I was in. I was like, this is just scratching the itch.
Sure.
But have you seen Daddy's Home?
Daddy's Home.
With Will Ferrell?
Yes, I've seen the first one, not the second one.
Both of them are terrible. But it was one of those things where I watched the first one. I was like, I got to see how bad the second one is. And it was I think it was a similar type of energy for me. But I want to I'm going to jump into my notes because I did do a lot of looking because there are things that I was laughing so much through the first watch through that it was just now like being in New York, kind of in a different place in life. I'm like, what exactly were the things that made me enjoy, in quotes, this movie so much? My favorite genre is rom-com, and I love coming of age movies.
Yeah, sure.
So that is one of the things about this movie. And the one of the big things about like Breakfast Club, Perks of Being a Wallflower, 10 Things I Hate About You is that it feels like it knew what it was doing, and it felt like in a strange world this could have happened, right?
Yeah.
The 10 Things I Hate About You, it's like these are microcosms within a high school that perfect series of events, maybe like there's some sense of reality. Kissing Booth has no sense of reality in my opinion.
Kissing Booth, even the first one, which I said I kind of like lightly like.
Yes.
does not exist on any plane of real. It's basically a fantasy movie.
No,
I would say like, I guess we should do a quick rundown of these movies because I'm not sure that everybody's going to watch them. Frankly, I don't really think everybody should watch these.
If you're like me and you're like, I'll say exactly what I find funny a little bit later, but if you really find parts of this movie to be hilarious, and I was still laughing out loud at some moments because of how bad they were, then we have the same sense of humor. But yeah, let's do a rundown and then I'll jump into my thesis.
This is, you might know, you might remember like character names better than I do. I'm mostly by so wait, let's see. Joey King is the main character. She plays Elle Evans. Elle Evans, who was born on the same day as her best friend, Lee Flynn.
Yes.
Their moms were best friends and they grow up being best friends with each other. You are shown this through, the first movie starts out with a mom dying montage.
Yep.
You see her mom get cancer, watch Elle go through like stages of grief as like a young teenager losing her mom. It's a very bizarre way to start a movie titled Kissing Booth.
Yeah, Kissing Booth is kind of forced in there, which is, it's hilarious.
It's a framework for what happens in the first movie. And then in the second movie, they're like, oh shit, I think we kind of have to do it again. The third movie doesn't even attempt it.
Well,
there's an Easter egg at the end, really, but it's not really.
That's where it really forced a lot of things.
Yes,
it
really does feel like they're like, shit, I wish we had hung it on the friendship rules instead of the Kissing Booth. So they're best friends, and Lee has an older brother named Noah, played by Jacob Elordi, who is probably the biggest mainstream talent to come out of these movies so far.
Joey King is
like prominent, but Jacob Elordi is because he was on Euphoria. He's in the new Paul Schrader later this year. He's having a good moment.
Yeah.
They all kind of grow up together and like as kind of a unified family. Like Joey has Elle has a little brother, like a much younger little brother who barely factors into these movies.
Yeah, and the dad. The dad is non-existent.
So they kind of grow up together, and then they go to a private school together. And I want to touch
a private school. I have no clue.
They're wearing the uniforms that makes me think this is a private school.
No one wears a tie right at that school.
Yeah,
that was a thing. And they're all the women are in mini skirts and ties that don't. It's like, come on. This is not a reality that anyone lives in.
Well, that's kind of what I want to say here is that if this movie is trying to endear me to these characters and find them relatable in any way, shape, or form,
they're not.
It is doing a huge disservice to the ability of the movie to do that by having them live in these like Malibu beach houses with the most amazing. They're like, the entire house is made out of glass, and all of them have beachfront views.
Basically, the first real scene of the movie is Elle like on a lounge chair, and her best friend Lee Flynn comes running off a balcony,
the second story of a building.
Yes, and jumping into this pool that's deep enough that you could jump in
from that high up.
Yes, and it's like all concrete. It's not like a pool in the backyard. It's like this pool is a part of the house, and that is your introduction to the wealth of the Flynn family, which is never really addressed.
No, it's just kind of, I'll say that this movie's one kind of big casting coup is the Mrs. Flynn is played by Molly Ringwald.
Love the great choice.
She's great choice. She's a lot of fun.
Also
has
these one scene in every movie. That's it.
She kind of shows up. Like the movie kind of stops to be like, isn't it really cool that we got Molly Ringwald? Yeah. And then I'm not mad at her. I wouldn't really call this a great performance, but I'm happy she got a paycheck.
Yeah,
you know? She's totally solid. But it's never really explained. It's really funny. Her husband, the Flynn dad, is like gets like half a line in every movie. He's not even in every scene that Molly Ringwald is in.
Yeah,
he's just kind of there. He has this kind of bizarre, difficult to place European accent that is never explained.
So the dynamics between the two families, which you mentioned, it's the Flynn mother, played by Molly Ringwald, and Elle's mom were best friends. Elle's mom died, and so the Flynn mom is now the mother figure, and she has two sons.
Grow up in a sibling-like way with Elle,
but there's no point at which they justify why the families hang out as much as they do, because they seem to get together at least once every movie to hang out and have
like a big dinner or something.
And it seems like the dad has no relationship to the parents at all.
It's a weird situation for him. He's like, so my wife died and her best friend is going to kind of sort of take over the mother role. It's very weird.
Do you know anyone growing up that had a similar dynamic to those two families being friends, where the kids are best friends? Lee and Elle, best of friends, inseparable, though I would like to poke holes in that at some point. But the families feel obligated to spend Thanksgiving together in the second movie. That's how close they are.
It doesn't make a ton of sense. And I think the movie smartly just kind of ignores that. Cause if you get too deep into that, then like what we're doing now, you will spend way too much energy trying to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. But cause we actually didn't even describe what actually happens in the first movie. After the first day of school where Elle gets groped in like a really jarring, kind of out of nowhere
first
scene.
15 minutes.
Literally a guy walks up to her like, and by the way, this movie, especially the first one, is really obsessed with upskirt shots of Joey King's butt.
That's
it's like
I want to get into my theses.
For the tone of the rest of the movie, it's really weird how much, like, I don't know how else to put it than like cheesecake shots. Like a lot. She's in bikini, she's in underwear.
The way I wrote these movies, and this maybe is what makes me chuckle because of how much they missed the mark. Mm-hmm. This is a movie written from a female's perspective, a young woman's perspective, shot completely through the male gaze.
Yeah,
it just is. Mm-hmm. It's like all the men were in the room writing for how this woman should feel.
It's very... I find that the way that she is written, I never really am on board with what Elle is doing. Even though oftentimes when I'm watching a coming of age movie and I see a character acting stupidly, I'm like, well, I remember being 16. I remember making dumb choices that don't even make sense in my own mind when I think about them now. Like, I don't even remember what my at the time justification was.
Yeah.
She is so like contradictory and she's just kind of a mess in a way that is just kind of, as a viewer, very frustrating to try and engage with and to identify with the way that you're being asked to.
You can't identify with anyone in the movie.
No, because the first movie, the big issue here is that she's best friends with Lee.
Yes.
And after they set up as like an ill-defined fundraiser for the school, a kissing booth.
Yes.
She kisses his older brother, Noah, Jacob Elordi, and they start dating behind his back. And a thing that they had as like 6-year-olds set up as like, these are rules you never break.
Yes. Elle and Lee have this list of, they never show how many rules they are, but they'll refer to like rule number 7 is you get your best friend ice cream when you mess up.
Yeah. It's like you don't keep a secret from your best friend, or you're always happy for your best friend.
These rules have completely defined their life, and there's no reason for it.
No, and what I'll say is that I feel really confident saying this. Even at 16, which is still a pretty immature age, if I knew 2 people who were best friends, like I just went to school with them, and they were 16 and they were talking about, they're like, well, you remember it's important to adhere to rule number 7. I would bully them mercilessly. Yes. I would be like, that is, even at my immature age, I recognize that's baby shit. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, and it carries till they go to college. Like, these rules also are the creation of other conflict. I've been touching on a few different things. Let me run through everything quickly.
Did you write down the list of rules?
No.
Okay. I don't think we need to. They're very generalized and they have a lot of crossover with each other.
So this is the pros to this movie. My pros to this movie, or the trilogy, is I love the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. Great soundtrack. It had coherent stories, while not relatable, but coherent. And the color and lighting were great.
I'll say this. I don't always love it. These have like all 3 of the movies have a real kind of like bubblegummy aesthetic to them. Like everything is hyper saturated. Yeah. And it's, while I don't like it all the time, and it can be a little exhausting to look at for the cumulative like 6 hours of these movies.
Yeah.
It's certainly like, it's a choice. It's being made consciously.
And they execute it well.
Yes. And there's a lot of, more so than what I would refer to like just like Netflix churn, as if they're just like, we're putting out a movie at least once a week.
Yeah.
Not all of them are good as a result. I think that like more thought is given into like the editing of this movie. It has a lot of like what you would definitely call cheesy transitions. But again,
yes,
effort is being made. Whether I think that's successful is, up for some debate.
And the cons though, which we're kind of listing just a second ago, the cons are where I find a lot of humor to be, right? So we have the writers disconnect with reality.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of first ideas in the room, right?
Yes.
Like we didn't think through anything. Also disconnect. Everyone's attractive. The nerdy guy still has perfect skin. Like everyone is attractive.
Like being unattractive in this movie is like having curly hair. Like that's literally that's the attitude.
Over the top face gear in the first one. They show that person like 6 times to be like, see, we have those here.
There's one girl wearing a prop of like those braces that go around, which I'm pretty sure are obsolete. They don't exist anymore.
No.
We have like dental technology is advanced, but the prop itself looks like it isn't sized to the actress's face because
small?
It's like it's literally pressing her cheeks in.
Yes. So there's no sense of like, there's no nuance compared to like 10 Things I Hate About You. You see the breakdown. Even Mean Girls goes through the different hierarchies. Everyone's in the same hierarchy at this school. I already touched on the male gaze, but the big thing is all of the conflict is self-inflicted. And it all stems from these rules. There's not one thing that you could look at and go, if they had just had a normal conversation, this would not have been an issue.
I would push back on that a little bit because especially in the sequels, because towards the end of the first movie, Elle kind of talks to Lee and says like, I understand that we have these rules and we're really important to each other. I need to be able to live my adult life and maybe I don't need to adhere to my belief system at 6 years old as I go about doing that. And it is a consistent thing throughout all the movies that she will get to like a breaking point and tell Lee, I love you, man, but I need to be able to live my life. And he usually responds by throwing a tantrum.
That's like, what I'm saying.
And so the thing is that there are attempts at communication. I would almost say this movie is more about the need to establish boundaries.
Well, when does the communication happens in like the last 15 minutes besides the third movie? The first movie is they did a standalone thing. Then I think they got the second and third together. The second movie is a very similar copy to the tropes in the first one. The third I view as a referendum.
It looks like it is trying to somewhat course correct. And it does feel like it is trying to make a final statement for these characters before it leaves them,
yes,
if that makes sense. I guess that we should maybe give like very basic plot rundowns of 2 and 3 so that we can refer to events of them. So the first movie, as we said, it leads to Elle and Lee reconciling, and Elle ends the movie in a relationship with Noah. But at the end of that movie, he goes off to Harvard. So which by the way, these idiots are not getting into Harvard. I'm sorry.
The trope of Noah in the first movie is that he's a guy who has anger issues that can't stop getting into fights and will disappear. He's just a classic avoidant. And at one point, they literally say he's at risk of not graduating because he's missed so much school. And then we find out he gets into Harvard.
With like no waitlisting.
No, he's in, and he's embarrassed that he got into Harvard.
He's like, it's so dumb.
It's like, I don't want anyone to hear about it. I'm like, bro, you got into the top school.
You got into Harvard.
In maybe the world.
It's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these characters, that's the thing, is that only ever just makes him look more out of touch and impossible to identify with.
And I want to get into the second and third so we can refer back to it. But the first one, the conflict, the climax of the conflict is,
he's at Harvard and this is the first one. This is the first movie.
Yeah, I seen the conflict of that movie. The climax of it. The climax of the conflict is when Lee finds out that Elle and Noah are dating and then been sleeping with each other. And basically they get into a fight. They go into the yard.
Yeah.
And Lee goes, have you all slept together?
Yeah.
And they say yes. And she goes, oh, so Elle is just like a girl that you pick up at the club. And I'm just like, this woman has no agency in this movie literally about her.
No,
they're referring to her as an object and making decisions for her.
There's a specific statement that Lee makes at one point that like, I never come back to his character after he says this because I just find him so kind of gross and off-putting.
Yeah.
But he's about to like get in his, by the way, like cherry Camaro, like to like leave forever. And he says, my whole life, I never had anything that Noah had except for one thing, you. And now he has it. He literally calls her a thing.
Yeah.
And says that like, this is not about my relationship to you. It's about my competitive relationship with my brother.
Yes.
Who, by the way, there are a couple scattered scenes.
They have no relationship.
They have no relationship with each other. They barely interact with each other.
Yeah.
This is their whole relationship is like refracted through the lens of Elle and their competition and possessiveness towards her.
That disconnect to me is one of the things that like I'm trying to again figure out why I found this so funny the first time I watched it. I think in those moments when they clearly refer to her as an object, I'm like, come on.
It is a little, it's saying the quiet part out loud too.
Yeah.
It's like you said, they're like, these were all first ideas. And instead of kind of hammering them out and changing the dynamics in a way where like this movie might actually be used to say something.
Yeah.
Because like also you could have this movie be about characters who view each other as objects and then have the movie find a way to say something about people who view each other as objects, right? This movie never really does that. Like the closest I can come to any thesis is that this is a movie about how exhausting it is to have people in your life, or this is a series about how exhausting it is to have people in your life who don't have any boundaries, who just feel entitled to you.
Yes.
It doesn't make any statement on that other than, wow, these people sure are tiring to have in your life.
Yes. The one of the things too we didn't mention about the first movie that does play a full throughout all of them is that Lee and Elle are obsessed with Dance Dance Revolution, which kind of gets into the second one.
It's a pretty important plot in the second one, in as much anything that happens in the second movie can be considered important. But it's a very basic, like, how do you do a sequel to a like high school romance story, which like if you've ever seen Not Another Teen Movie, the ending of that movie is kind of like, well, obviously what comes next is not going to be very good or compelling because they're doing like a big tearful goodbye at the airport. And she says, wait, we shouldn't stay together. You know, we'll obviously have the summer, but then you'll go off to college and cheat on me and you'll call me a slut and you know, it'll never be good together. That's basically how this movie plays out, except for that nobody actually ever cheats because Lee kind of.
Yeah.
So Noah is off at Harvard, where he makes friends with a woman, I can't remember, Chloe is her name, I think.
Yeah.
Who Elle spends the entire movie constantly assuming he's cheating on her with Chloe.
Yeah.
And at the same time, which by the way, I have to address, I don't buy this plot point for a single second. She wants to go to Harvard to go be with Noah. And she has a conversation with her dad about paying out-of-state tuition for a private school, where he, while sitting in their beautiful beach house, which is not anywhere near as beautiful as the Flynn's, but it's still a gorgeous home that anybody would be lucky to have, is saying, I'm sorry, I don't have money to send you to school. You know, and so she decides to...
We don't know what the dad's job is. He's never mentioned.
He says in the third movie, he says, I took a job where I have to work weekends that I hate so I can make money to put towards your schooling.
Yeah,
but he never says what it is.
And they also have an extra car. So Noah has a motorcycle that he rides, and like it's a part of the first movie. But he gives it to Elle after he goes to school, and Elle is now driving it everywhere. And then at one point, she doesn't want to drive it. We'll get into the plot of it. But there's just an extra car at home. The dad's at work. There's just an extra car in a one-parent household sitting there. I'm like, you all have some money.
I don't believe it. And then what they literally do is she sees a flyer at the arcade where they play DDR or Dance Dance. It's got like, it's not called DDR. It's like Dance Dance Singing or something stupid. Yeah. But she sees a flyer that says like, DDR competition, first place, 50 grand, which even at like, I was trying to think, even at the height of the popularity of something like DDR or like Guitar Hero, those competitions were like 10 grand for like a national competition.
That was your takeaway. My takeaway is she's thinking this is going to help pay for Harvard. That's half a year at Harvard.
Yeah, no,
that doesn't even help. And she's splitting that with someone.
Yeah, it's either that or he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart.
Which is crazy. You get $50,000. You're going to let a friend, we haven't mentioned Marco yet.
Marco, who is kind of also the classic, like, he's really just kind of another Noah. He's just a new hot guy that she meets under similar circumstances.
He transfers into the school, into the high school.
And they butt heads, and then eventually, Lee, who has a girlfriend actually from the first movie,
Rachel,
who is, who I honestly, like, actually, if there's one character I relate to in any of these movies, it's Rachel, because she's dating Lee, and her whole thing is, your relationship with your friend is really weird. I think you need to establish some boundaries. She comes on every single date with us, and she pretends like she's your girlfriend. And it's not even really a jealous thing. It's just a that's actually something I really like about Rachel. She's never really like jealous towards Elle. She's just really sick of her shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the closest thing to a human being in any of these movies.
Yes.
Because she's just like, call me crazy. I would love to go to prom with my boyfriend, and instead you guys are wearing costumes together or something.
Rachel gets a raw deal. Also, the movies have a theme until the third one, which is a referendum in my eyes, of women hating women. All the women other than Elle has no female friends in it.
She has like, in like what I consider to be, this is actually one of the most telling things, that it's written and directed by a man, an older man, because they think that this might be like a reference young people might enjoy. There's this group of kind of knockoff Mean Girls that she calls the OMGs, because their names are Olivia, Mia, and Gwyneth.
Yeah.
They're non-characters. They're basically like a Greek chorus who shows up to be annoying for a few seconds and then they leave. That's the closest thing to a female friend she has in these movies.
And the female friends, I think in the first movie, they say, "Oh, we're friends now. You can call us bitches." And I'm like, that's
the thing, is it's not even, it's almost too stupid to be misogynistic.
And that's the piece where I'm like, someone greenlit this. Someone was like, this is what they say.
I've put it this way before. It's what I always think of when I see something that is just kind of baffling in a movie. I'm like, do you know how many people have to say yes to something for it to make it to a screening?
For me, that's the funny piece.
Yes, that enough people. In this case, I think because Netflix, all three of these are Netflix original movies. They didn't get theatrical releases. I believe the second and third were made Back to the Future style, where they were just basically made as one production.
I think so.
And then they put them both out like a year apart. This is, I think, the result of just content churn. They're like, that's great. It has to come out that week because we need a new movie out every single week.
And I think it was, they were filmed probably before the pandemic.
The first one is.
The second
one, I think the second one was like, I think it was, they had maybe started production like when COVID was happening.
Yeah.
And then they stopped, and then they might have finished it from there. But theoretically, yes. And because I remember there was an issue with like, pay raises between each movie. Normally, like you do a trilogy, actors, if they're successful, will say, "Oh, okay, well, I helped make the last one successful. I'd like to make more money on this one." The second and third, I believe, were made as one production primarily for the reason of, we don't want to have to give them pay raises for a third movie.
Yeah,
we want to get them contracted. You know, these are young upstart actors. We want to get them contracted now, so that the third movie ends up being cheaper.
Yeah,
Jacob Elordi, like similar to kind of how Robert Pattinson talks about being in Twilight, has said making those movies is stupid. I don't really like those movies. And from the way making them sounds like it was, I don't really blame him for feeling that way about these.
No. In the second movie, I don't think he's at Harvard most of the time, and most of his shots are completely alone.
He's on the phone and he's just kind of sitting around a dorm room.
Yes.
That's another actual like similarity to the second Twilight movie, a movie we actually did an episode about here, that Edward is not in the second book, and he's mostly just like appears as an apparition to Bella throughout it. And this is kind of a similar structure where he's just this theoretical, like far off in the distance boyfriend that she just ignores calls to. And
we mentioned Chloe, And so Noah's at school, and it all happens before Thanksgiving. So the first 2 months.
Yeah. This is immediately a problem, their relationship.
So it's a problem. Elle ends up going out, and she actually, the crazy thing is, alcohol is completely okay for these 16-year-olds.
There are multiple scenes in Boston when she goes and visits Harvard, when they're like at the beach in their own town, presumably where like you see them working at nearby restaurants. Presumably the bartenders there will recognize them. It's not that they're like just having parties where I would accept that they have booze. They're ordering drinks at the bar at like 17, 18, maybe 19 for Jacob Elordi.
Well, do you know how old Chloe is? She says it in the third movie.
How old is she there?
23. So Noah gets to school, has no friends at Harvard, which is crazy to believe because his personality is like jock, bro type.
Yeah.
And then he meets Chloe. They become close friends. This 22-year-old, presumably because it's a year before the final movie, and this 18-year-old become best friends. And she's like, I'm just not attracted to him. And that's the end.
That's no further conversation is had about it.
And Elle thinks that Chloe is sleeping with Noah.
The contrivances around Chloe are it feels maybe the laziest element of what I think is easily the worst of these three movies.
Yeah.
So you don't actually this isn't even hinted at throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Like you just see shots of her that are very clearly meant to make us as the audience think that, oh, he actually is cheating on her with Chloe. But at the end, like in their final tearful, we're going to hug and make up at the gazebo where they kiss at the end of the first movie. He says, well, what you have with Lee is so special. So I met Chloe and I wanted that for myself, which honestly sounds like gaslighting on his part to keep a girl that,
Yeah. I could see if you're like, that's one of the things where it's on the cusp of reality where you go, well, you're young and stupid. I could see how you overthought that, but also you're not telling your girlfriend about your best college friend.
Yeah.
And it's because they say he didn't say it because he would sleep around with women before. Mm-hmm. And that was like his character.
Yes, it's a weird. The second movie,
logical leaps.
The second movie kind of drops some elements of his character, and like the fighting thing, they pull a reverse Marty McFly. Whereas in the first movie, there's never any instance of it, and then in Back to the Future Part 2, Marty seemingly cannot avoid starting fights the second somebody calls him a chicken.
Yeah.
It's kind of a reverse of that where this guy is like Jacob Elordi punches someone in basically every scene of the first movie.
Yeah.
And in the second movie, they're like, that's inconvenient to the story we're telling. We're going to kind of just pretend that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It comes back a little bit in the third movie, but not a ton. The stuff that happens with Chloe, there's a moment at the end where you said the two families spend Thanksgiving together.
Yeah. So
he brings Chloe home for Thanksgiving with him.
Yes.
And then later Chloe justifies it to Elle by saying, he didn't bring me home because he wanted to introduce me to his family. He brought me home so that you and I could become friends. Like Elle and Chloe.
Yeah. And they were in Boston together earlier. And she shows up at the dinner that Elle is at and is like, oh, you're here. I'm like, you knew she was there. You knew your best friend is telling you his girlfriend's coming to town. You're like, this is the dinner you happen to be at?
Yes. It's Chloe's performance up to this point is like deliberately misleading, not in a way where I identify with Elle's misunderstanding of the situation. I just am like, this movie doesn't is just like lying to me for the first part of it. Because Chloe's performance up until this point is she walks in and like shoves her boobs in Jacob Elordi's face.
And always calls him handsome or beautiful or gorgeous.
And is like twirling her mustache, basically saying like, would be a shame if someone fucked your boyfriend for you. Like this. And then all of a sudden it's, guess what? I'm not attracted to him. And I'm just
for no reason.
I'm his weird big sister benefactor. Who's apparently a super senior at Harvard the following year. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
And that's the we'll summarize the third movie, and I have specific moments from that where I laughed out loud that I'll run through. But this is one of the things where I'm like, they just threw it all in there, and they're just packaging it and selling it.
And then cut none of it out because the movie is so fucking long.
And there's there's two men who end up together that like Al is part of. And I also want to point out through all the movies and everything we talked up to this point, every dramatic scene is never in there's one, the climax of the first movie it's just Al, Lee, and Noah fighting. Every other fight that happens either has the entire family there or the entire school is watching.
Yes.
It is never like, hey, we should talk. It's like, hey, I feel very okay yelling at you in front of everyone we know in our community. And everyone's like reacting. Everyone's in on it. But it's like, it's an overinflated ego of the storyteller to imagine that. And like, that's what they want us to think.
And looking at like how this whole thing is structured, it is narrated by Elle.
Yes.
And like sections of it are told through montage that she narrates. The end of the third movie is the entire school. Apparently there are no cliques and there's no social divides. Everybody's best friends.
Yeah.
Ends in tearful hugs and goodbyes. Like literally every minor character gets one.
Yeah.
It's like you said, these people are very self-obsessed. They see the world as revolving around them. So the fact that she's telling the story with everyone saying, and we all loved each other and got along, feels like she is doing this with a total disconnect from like how the people around her perceived her. Because if she were every other week starting a big shit fit with her boyfriend and her weirdly possessive best friend, they would be like, oh God, I fucking hate her.
Yeah.
I can't stand to be around her.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. But the third movie, second movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The second movie, all of the climax of Chloe, Elle confronting Chloe, Noah confronting Elle, and Lee always has drama. Lee's thinking about going to Harvard instead of going to Berkeley because the rule is they have to go to the same school together. That whole argument happens at Thanksgiving dinner. I've never been at a Thanksgiving dinner. Like everyone makes jokes. Oh, someone says something, but part of the joke is that no one fully says what they're thinking in response. And it doesn't ever escalate to that point. This family, everyone says everything without with only a slight ability to hide what they're actually saying.
Yes. Every statement is a clapback. Every single thing is this big
Thanksgiving dinner,
dramatic statement
at the nicest beach house you've ever seen.
Yes. And like, that's the thing is that it's almost cartoonish to see this backdrop that you're seeing these people do this in. I'm like, what would make you people happy? Truly. You are sitting in the most why don't you all jump off the roof into the pool? Yeah. It's apparently safe to do that. Yeah. It happens once a movie. Yeah. So go fucking do that and go have fun. Molly Ringwald's there.
Molly Ringwald in the Thanksgiving, as all of it's happening, she goes, have the yams. You'll get drunk off them. I'm like, this writing is incredible.
Yes. That's the thing is that like, I would use that as like a little sidebar here as like kind of like silly, and sometimes people misuse the word campy. I wouldn't really use it to describe this.
Yeah, I was going back and forth on that.
This is more like
it's camp without self-awareness.
I think that like I don't even want to necessarily call this like a Hallmark movie or something, because those movies are made with an aching amount of self-awareness.
Yes.
You know, those movies are made where like literally the characters have kind of like Marvel movie dialogue where they say, this is the point where you kiss me and tell me that you love me and we should live in this town. So like, it doesn't even really have that. Not saying I miss that, to be clear. I think actually it's something that makes this movie enough of a bizarre fascination that I do understand why you would think that there's enough of a conversation to talk about it.
Yeah.
Is the fact that none of the characters have any self-awareness whatsoever. So, but yeah, the second movie, how exactly does the second movie end? I can't honestly remember.
The second movie ends after, so Noah's going back to Harvard after Thanksgiving with Chloe. Elle goes to the school fair where the kissing booth is and realizes she can't be with Marco, which we skipped over his plot.
We skipped over Marco. His plot is that he has no character. He's a hot guy.
I'll go through my favorite moment in the entire series, which includes Marco at the end. But Elle realizes she's in love with Noah.
Yeah.
Goes to the airport. Noah goes to the kissing booth because he's in love with Elle. they miss each other, end up at the place where they ended up making out in the first movie, and then rekindle their friendship. And then you fast forward, this is fall, this is November. The next moment we see them is Elle's graduating. Everything else is fine the rest of the school year.
It's so weird how accelerated
yes.
the beginning of this is. And you're like, you expect me to believe after having a public outburst once a week for 2 months, that you guys then just had a great 10 months afterwards.
And then the third one picks up where it's great, and then they start fighting again. I'm like, the majority of your relationship has been perfect.
The third one, that's the thing, is that I'm like, you guys have rough patches like everybody does, and then off screen you apparently have the most perfect, picturesque, wonderful, nobody ever fights. Yeah. And so the third movie, which similarly picks up with the biggest disconnect from reality that any of these movies have.
Yeah.
It's that they find out that the Flynn's second beach home, which, by the way, if you own a first beach home, I don't really think a second one is necessary at the first place. But the second beach home that they have all these wonderful memories of, the parents are going to sell for honestly just no real given reason. They're like, I don't know.
They're the plot. It's like, you all will be in school, no one's going to use it. And it says at the end of the movie,
want a second beach home that's not getting
sell
used.
It for millions.
Yeah. And so they say, we're going to sell it, but we have to fix it. They're like, this place is a dump. We have to fix it up to get it ready to sell. And you're like, this is the most gorgeous house I've ever seen. I don't know what you're referring to. This is a beautiful home.
Yeah.
And so the kids suckered the parents into saying, can we live there together?
The two couples,
by the way. So Lee and his girlfriend, Rachel, who we haven't touched on a ton.
Yeah.
But like, she's going to live there. And then Elle and Noah are going to live there. And basically they're, while like holding, like basically like cupping their girlfriend's boobs, saying like, is it cool?
Really
is it cool? Is it cool if we like use this house to just fuck constantly and like high five while we're banging our girlfriends the whole time?
And we'll clean some stuff up every once in a while.
Yeah. It's just, and they give in with and it's so crazy. And the fact that this movie is crazier makes me like it a little bit more than the last one, because it's like, that's obviously no parent in their right mind would ever like give in to that. Although I guess Molly Ringwald loves teen drinking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, that's the setup, is we're going to live in this perfect picturesque beach house that we all have all these wonderful memories of. And we're going to have one last final epic summer. And the framing of it is that when they're starting to clean the house, Lee and Elle find this list from when they were 6 saying it's like our bucket list or whatever. We're going to do all these awesome things, and we're going to do them all this summer before the conflict is that she will either go to USC to be besties with Lee or go to Harvard.
She'll go to Berkeley or Harvard.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, she'll go to Berkeley or Harvard.
Because that's where their parents met. And they said they're going to go there kind of no matter what.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like Lee, you never hear anything about what he wants to do like with his life until like the very end of the third movie.
He's like
you see him like drawing like architecture.
Yeah.
And that's it. Nothing else is ever actually given about it. So that's what the movie has hung its hat on. And like, to its credit, I actually think the last 30 minutes of this last movie are like kind of fun because they're trying to wrap up so much bullshit all at once.
And it's the referendum. Let me go through the moments of the third movie.
Yes.
Because I wrote down the referendum moments and the timestamps because there was a lot that needed to be made up for, right?
Yes.
So in the first 15 minutes, they decide, maybe for the first time, other than the climax of the other two movies, to talk about things that they're not sharing. They go, oh, I should mention this to you, because all the conflict happens because someone's not disclosing some information.
Yes.
And then woman talking together. I don't think the first two passed the Bechdel test. I feel like,
so like this would be the closest. Every movie, there's a moment where Molly Ringwald has a sit down with Elle and says, this is what you need to do to solve your problem. But she's always talking about the boys.
Yes.
Like she's not actually.
The same with Rachel and Elle have a makeup moment after Thanksgiving, the second movie.
But again, they're talking about the same guy that they're both trying to fight
so
over.
The 33-minute mark, they're like talking about what do you want to do with your life? Like they really try and do that. 40 minutes in, Lee takes Noah's side, which never happens. Their brothers hate each other, and now they're like, we're going to talk to each other. Then Chloe, Elle apologizes to Marco, which she didn't do in the second movie at 55 minutes. Noah's not fighting at 60 minutes. 65 minutes, the dad finally has a meaningful conversation and says, Elle, you're acting like an absolute lunatic.
It's kind of there's another thing too throughout the third movie, because this is never really addressed significantly in the other movies. The dad, it's implied for like the first time, starts dating a new woman.
Yes.
And is honestly like fairly respectful boundary wise in terms of like introducing this woman into their lives. She's a pretty nice woman. She understands that she's dealing with children whose mother has passed away. And Elle is really, really nasty to her. She's literally just like, hey, how are you doing? And she's like, I have to leave. I hate you. I can't go. I can't talk to you.
Yeah, there's no reason for so much of this stuff. But yeah, and then the third movie, it kind of the climax is when Elle decides she doesn't want to go to either Harvard or Berkeley. She decides to go to USC to study video game design. And Elle and Noah's like, Elle, we're done. It's just too much. I can't have you making decisions about your life to come to Harvard for me. And her dad kind of, or was it her dad or Molly Ringwald was like, have you ever thought about what you want to do? And she's like, what? No.
And
you're right. I haven't at all. I'm like, it took 6 hours of movie time for you to just realize that you've never thought about what you want in life.
It's so crazy. She got into Harvard without I remember this conversation now. She had a conversation with Molly Ringwald. This is at the end of the third movie where she says, have you ever thought about doing something you want to do? And you get this like actually very relatable moment of kind of making excuses for yourself. Like when you are 17 or 18, where she's like, well, lots of kids don't, decide their major till after they've been there, sometimes not even for a year. And she's like, yeah, but like those kids at least like have interests other than my two sons. Like, do you have hobbies? Do you have things that you like more than other things? And you see her kind of get cornered and realize, I've done no thinking about my own life. This is a good point.
Yeah. Which is again, it's a movie written from a woman's perspective. And we're neither of us identify that way. Like we can't relate to that struggle as much, but it seems very, it doesn't seem realistic.
But the issue with Elle doing it is not that she's been pressured to only care about boys in her life. In fact, actually, this seems like the opposite. There's a lot of people in her life who are deeply supportive and who are suggesting that she go do. Actually, the worst person in her life is Lee, who seems to be a huge. We haven't really talked about Lee very much. The actor's name is Joe Courtney. I don't recognize him from anything else.
Yeah. No.
I apologize, Joe, if you're killing it out there. But
bloopers. He seems like a good actor.
He seems like a totally like nice guy to be around, but the character is so toxic and clingy. And then on top of that, he has this girlfriend, Rachel, who seems like the only normal person in the entire movie, who he just constantly is like slam dunking to be like, Elle, what are we doing tomorrow?
And forgets to tell her that the Halloween costume has changed.
Yeah. All of it is usually the way that any conflict throughout the movie, not even just the main one, but like minor conflicts, is that Elle does something without telling Lee. And then knowing that it's a thing that he wouldn't like in the first place. And to avoid him getting angry, conceals it for so long that he ends up blowing up even more so at the end.
Yeah.
And all of the conflict is around her being avoidant, but it's because she's being avoidant because she's been conditioned by his past behavior that he's going to blow up if she tells him anything.
Yeah.
I kind of think that like he's the problem in all of these
movies. That's a great point, because the third movie, after Noah breaks up with Elle, which is probably the right decision, Elle goes to talk to Lee, and because they're going to go dance on the DDR machine for the last time before it disappears forever. And Elle misses it, the machine's gone, and Noah's like, you're the most selfish person I've ever met in my entire life. That's all. You don't even think about me. And she's like, bro, I've been working 2 jobs and rearranging my schedule to stay at the beach with you and do everything on this arbitrary list we made up when we were 6 years old.
Yeah. The third movie I kind of like that element because honestly, when I was 18 and I had a part-time job and I was prepping for college and, you know, I still had my high school girlfriend at the time and it's the first time in your life that you're actually being told, hey, there are things in life more important than school. Like that first summer afterwards. So like, honestly, I do actually like that like overwhelming angle.
Sure.
And then she's got to take care of her little brother.
No, this is the most realistic depiction of, I feel like, what a high schooler would be going through.
Yeah, because that's the thing is, even if you are, you know, moneyed, you come from that background, just the new way you have to deal with time management. I'm like, yeah, honestly, I'm like, I can relate to being in this situation. The third movie actually, like, it kind of has this point in the referendum is a good term. It has this point around the middle where it realizes like, oh shit, we like have to give Chloe something to do in this movie. We have to give Marcos. Chloe's parents are getting divorced, and that like is like a 2-scene subplot. There actually is. I find there's a dropped subplot that they in the opening montage of a road trip that the two couples go on before the events of the third movie.
Yeah,
there is this one moment where Elle is narrating it, and she's like, I saw Noah and Rachel, who's Lee's girlfriend, becoming friends, and then whip pans over to Lee is like, and I saw Lee seeing Noah and Rachel becoming friends. So I'm like, oh, is there going to be a subplot about Lee being insecure that his brother's going to take his actual girlfriend now? And then the movie is like, we do not have time for that. We cannot fucking do that.
I mean, they would have.
That's the thing is, I think that like, yeah, there's going to be a director's cut of Kissing Booth 3 where that's like 2 hours and 40 minutes with the whole Noah and Rachel subplot.
I think you said it right where you said it's bizarre. And I know we have to wrap shortly.
Yeah.
There's just a bizarrety of this movie. And again, I love like 10 Things I Hate About You. I'll maybe watch every other year.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. There's a lot of moments, but this is like someone tried to make a movie in a similar vein and completely missed the mark at most steps.
I think 10 Things I Hate About You is a great reference for this because that's similarly a movie about siblings navigating a dynamic where their romance depends on the dynamic there. They also are living in like extremely comfortable means.
Yeah.
Going to
justified means. But the other one, the richness of everyone is not justified at all.
No, it's not. It doesn't. Never. It's just here so that they can have good looking shooting locations, which like you said, do match the cinematography's aesthetic. So it's not like it's totally unmotivated.
Yeah.
It just makes it very hard for me to care about the characters. But I guess it's, as you said, we do kind of have to finish up here on these. I wanted to ask if you had any final thoughts on like, because initially, yes, these were things that you brought up to me under the lens of like, I'd love to stand up for the value of these. Do you still feel that way after this rewatch?
There are moments that I will look back to and say, how did this ever get greenlit? And the fact that it did gives me hope that more bizarre things or ideas that I have that are a little out there do somehow slip through the cracks. I'm not saying I want to make things along the same vein at all, because some of these things are wild, but there are two moments that I always point out to when I talk about this movie. The first movie, the plot is Ella's never been kissed, never had a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Her first kiss is Noah. The next time they hang out, they are fucking under the Hollywood sign. I'm like, how do we get there?
My initial thought, by the way, all three of these movies have like the big emotional centerpiece that these characters keep going back to is their love for the Hollywood sign, where she loses her virginity in the first movie, by the way.
Which, you can't even get there. I'm pretty sure you can't.
I think it's illegal to go there, but I will say maybe the most embarrassing place to willingly lose your virginity. Like that's crazy to me. I cannot think of a place I'd be more embarrassed.
Yes. She goes from 0 to never kissing a guy to fucking within like a 2-day span under the Hollywood sign. I'm like, how do they think this is relatable to anyone? The next plot is Marco, who we didn't touch upon, which I guess in the grand scheme of things is like,
he's a hot guy that she likes in the second movie, and then he likes her back in the third movie, and it causes some friction. That's Marco.
Marco's Elle's partner for the DDR competition that they win. But when in their montage of hanging out, when they first become friends, it goes from practicing dancing to them on a Ferris wheel. Now they're on the beach all of a sudden, and Marco happens to have a guitar after not having a guitar all day.
He literally like pulls it.
And he pulls it out, and he doesn't even sing. He's just like humming and strumming and plays maybe 12 bars. And Elle's just like, oh my God.
Oh my.
I'm just like, he didn't He didn't even have a guitar 5 minutes ago. Where did this come from? You're now in love with this guy? It's the most stereotypical, like, it's more made fun of for guys not to do that than it is for that to actually happen. And I'm like, that's great. That's great that made it in.
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't think for the whole movie, I'm gonna be honest with you, if I were depressed, I would maybe watch the first movie and get like some fun escapism from it. I don't know that I would be like, if I started the second movie, I don't know that I would have finished it if I had to. I think
that's where the addicted personality piece came in.
I do the same thing where I'm like, I start a series, a book series, and I'm like, I have to read them all because there's that sunk cost fallacy in your mind. But I do that with movies all the time too. I mean, that's kind of, I have a change in the format here. That's kind of related to the way that we're going to be doing episodes moving forward. But, and before we just kind of like, touch on that to finish up here. Connor, one, thank you so much for stepping in front of the camera here. I'm happy to actually get you on for one. But two, do you have anything to plug on the way out here?
Nothing. I mean, besides the studio, My Friend's Basement Studio.
Yeah, we have.
We did comedy shows here, which Devin came to, which I'm very appreciative of. But just follow us on Instagram.
Connor did a set too. I'd never seen you do. Like, I'd never seen you perform, so it was fun getting to see that there and then also see it a second time here.
That's a whole new world. But at My Friend's Basement Studio on Instagram, that's where we'll be sharing most of our stuff. But that's pretty much it right now.
Yeah, okay. With all that being said, this has been Bad First Impression. You can follow us on all socials at BFI Pod for clips, for updates about changes in the show. Right now, I'm not quite announcing it just yet. We're in this kind of weird period where we are prepping for a change in the way that we do episodes. So that's coming up soon. But just, follow us, like I said, for any upcoming updates. You can follow me at What If Devin on all socials as well. If you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas, you can go ahead and send them to mailbag@bfipod.com. And what do you want to go out with on this one? I guess
it all happened because of a kissing booth. That's the last movie.
Right,
line of the movie.
Okay, so until next time, it all happened because of a kissing booth. Bye, y'all. See you next time.